the Montreal Canadiens about to make the most franchise-altering trade in recent memory? Or would acquiring Quinton Byfield for this massive package represent the kind of desperate overpay that haunts organizations for decades? This proposed blockbuster sending Kirby Dach, David Reinbacher, and a 2026 first-round pick to Los Angeles has ignited passionate debates about risk management, asset allocation, and the true cost of championship ambitions. Let's be completely transparent about what this trade represents. It's Montreal betting their entire future on the belief that Byfield can transform from promising prospect into franchise-changing center. We're talking about surrendering a former third overall pick, a fifth overall defenseman, and premium draft capital for a player who, while talented, hasn't yet proven he can consistently carry second-line responsibilities at the NHL level. That's not just aggressive. It's bordering on reckless unless you have absolute conviction in Byfield's untapped potential. The financial commitment alone should give Montreal pause for serious consideration. Byfield's 5-year, $31.25 million contract represents significant long-term investment in a player whose production has been inconsistent despite flashes of brilliance. His 54 points in 81 games last season suggests steady development, but those numbers hardly scream franchise-altering impact worthy of such massive compensation. When you're surrendering multiple premium assets, you need to be certain you're acquiring a player who can immediately elevate your competitive ceiling. Kent Hughes' recent comments about building a Stanley Cup contender reveal the organizational mindset driving these discussions, and they're simultaneously inspiring and concerning. His acknowledgement that perfect rosters can't be built in single summers shows realistic perspective, but it also creates pressure to make significant moves that might not represent optimal value. Sometimes the worst trades happen when general managers feel compelled to make splash acquisitions rather than patient, strategic improvements. The Reinbacher component of this package represents perhaps the most painful sacrifice from Montreal's perspective. The Swiss defenseman was selected 5th overall just last year and represents exactly the kind of right-handed defensive prospect every organization craves. Trading him away for a center, regardless of Byfield's potential, feels like robbing Peter to pay Paul rather than addressing fundamental roster construction. Through balanced acquisition strategies, Byfield's physical profile creates undeniable appeal for Montreal's coaching staff and development system. At 6'4", he brings the kind of size and reach that modern NHL centers require to succeed in today's physical game. His combination of skating ability and frame suggests ceiling potential that can make this trade look brilliant in retrospect, but it also represents the kind of projection-based thinking that leads to spectacular failures when development curves flatten unexpectedly. The Kirby Dach inclusion adds fascinating psychological dimensions to this proposal beyond simple asset exchange. Montreal would essentially be admitting that their development system couldn't unlock his potential, while simultaneously betting on their ability to maximize Byfield's capabilities. That level of self-awareness could represent mature organizational thinking, or it could indicate concerning uncertainty about internal development processes. Los Angeles' perspective in this hypothetical deal reveals their own roster construction challenges and competitive timeline pressures. The Kings have been searching for sustainable success while managing an aging core, and acquiring Dach could provide the kind of upside bet that makes sense for their situation. Reinbacher would address their long-term defensive needs, while the first-round pick adds future flexibility to their asset portfolio. The injury concerns surrounding Dach can't be ignored when evaluating this package. From either perspective, his durability issues have been well documented, and trading him while his value might be depressed could represent smart asset management if Montreal believes those problems are likely to persist. However, it also means potentially giving up on a player who could still reach his considerable ceiling. With proper health management, Byfield's development trajectory suggests he's approaching a critical juncture where breakout seasons either materialize or players risk being permanently labeled as disappointments relative to draft position. His 23 goals last season represent encouraging progress, but the consistency and away reliability that define elite centers remain question marks. Montreal would be betting on their ability to provide the structure and opportunity necessary for his continued growth. The salary cap implications extend far beyond just Byfield's current contract, encompassing future extension discussions that could significantly impact Montreal's long-term flexibility. Teams acquiring players in early career phases must project not just immediate contributions, but also the cost of retaining them through their prime years. Those calculations often determine whether trades ultimately succeed or fail from organizational perspectives. Montreal's recent playoff success creates interesting context. For evaluating aggressive acquisition strategies, their young core exceeded expectations. But maintaining that momentum requires careful balance between patient development and strategic additions. Sometimes the worst thing for developing teams is premature pressure to accelerate timelines through expensive acquisitions that don't align with natural development curves. The Noah Dobson acquisition mentioned provides additional perspective on Montreal's current approach to roster construction. They have shown willingness to make significant moves when value aligns with need, but this Byfield proposal represents a different level of asset commitment that could limit future flexibility if results don't materialize as expected. Smart organizations maintain multiple pathways to improvement rather than gambling everything on single transactions. Hughes' competitive timeline comments suggest organizational confidence in their current trajectory, but they also create pressure to validate recent success through continued aggressive moves. The most successful rebuilds often involve knowing when to maintain patience versus when to accelerate. And this trade proposal tests Montreal's ability to make that distinction accurately. The ripple effects throughout Montreal's lineup would be immediate and significant. If this deal materializes, Byfield would instantly become their second-line center, while Suzuki anchors the top unit, creating the kind of depth that playoff teams require. However, losing Reinbacher could create long-term defensive concerns that prove more costly than any offensive improvements Byfield provides. Los Angeles' competitive situation adds urgency to their decision-making that could benefit Montreal's negotiating position. The Kings need to maximize their current window with veteran leaders, potentially making them willing to accept development projects like Doc in exchange for proven contributors like Byfield. Those timeline misalignments often create trading opportunities for patient organizations. The draft capital sacrifice represents perhaps the most concerning aspect of this proposal. From Montreal's long-term perspective, first-round picks provide organizational flexibility and cost control, talent that becomes increasingly valuable as salary caps tighten. Trading away such assets for unproven players, regardless of pedigree, limits future options and increases pressure on current acquisitions to succeed immediately. Consider the alternative scenarios if this trade doesn't happen. Montreal continues, searching for center help through other avenues, potentially finding more cost-effective solutions that don't require sacrificing premium assets. Byfield remains in Los Angeles, where his development continues under familiar systems and reduced pressure. Both organizations maintain flexibility for different approaches to roster improvement. The psychological pressure on Byfield following such a massive trade would be enormous, potentially creating exactly the kind of overwhelming expectations that have hindered his development in Los Angeles. Sometimes players perform better in familiar environments rather than new situations, where they're expected to immediately justify significant acquisition costs. This trade proposal perfectly encapsulates the tension between aggressive championship pursuit and sustainable organizational building. Montreal must decide whether Byfield represents the missing piece that elevates them to contender status or an expensive gamble that could set back their development timeline. If results don't materialize, the ultimate question becomes whether Montreal has enough confidence in their evaluation of Byfield to risk multiple premium assets on his continued development. Championship teams often require bold moves, but they also demand smart asset management that doesn't mortgage organizational futures for uncertain returns. What's your take on this potential franchise-defining trade? Would you sacrifice Reinbacher, Doc, and a first-round pick to land Byfield? Or does this package represent the kind of overpay that destroys rebuilds? Drop your thoughts in the comments about whether Montreal should swing for the fences or maintain their patient approach. And smash that like button if you want more analysis of the blockbuster moves that could reshape the entire competitive landscape.